If I could go back and sit down with myself on the day I made my very first investment and share everything I know now, the lessons that took years of reading, mistakes, losses, and slow progress to figure out, this video is exactly what I would say. This is not a list of strategies or fund recommendations. We have covered all of that in the earlier videos in this series. This is something different. These are the deeper lessons, the ones about mindset, about patience, about the emotional side of investing that nobody really prepares you for. The things that sound simple when you hear them, but take real experience to truly understand. Some of these I learned from books, some I learned from watching other people make expensive mistakes, and some I learned the hard way, firsthand. I am sharing all of them today because I genuinely believe that if you absorb even half of what is in this video before you start investing seriously, you will be so far ahead of where most people begin that the difference will be measurable in your net worth for the rest of your life. Let's go. Lesson 1. The market is designed to make you feel stupid. The first thing I wish someone had told me is that the financial markets are, in many ways, designed to make you feel like you are always doing the wrong thing. When the market is falling, every instinct you have tells you to sell and protect what is left. When the market is rising, every instinct tells you to buy more before you miss out. Both of these instincts are usually wrong, and acting on them is how most individual investors consistently underperform the very index funds they could be holding passively. This is not an accident. Markets are made up of millions of participants, institutions, hedge funds, algorithms, and individual investors, all reacting to the same news and each other. The emotional swings built into that system are real and they are powerful. Fear and greed are not abstract concepts in investing. They are measurable forces that move prices, create bubbles, trigger crashes, and generate recoveries. What I wish I had understood from the start is that your feelings about the market at any given moment are almost perfectly unreliable as a guide to what you should do. The moments that feel most dangerous, when everything is falling and every headline is catastrophic, are historically the most important moments to stay invested or even add more. And the moments that feel most exciting, when everything is rising and everyone around you seems to be getting rich, are often the moments of highest risk. Learning to act opposite to your instincts, or better yet, to act not at all, is one of the most valuable skills in investing. Lesson 2. Your timeline changes everything. Before I started investing, I thought of the stock market as something that either went up or went down. I had no real sense of how completely your investment timeline transforms the meaning of those movements. Over one day, the market is essentially random. Over 1 year, it is volatile and unpredictable. Over 5 years, it is more likely to be positive than negative. Over 10 years, it has historically been positive the vast majority of the time. Over 20 years, in the entire recorded history of the U.S. stock market, there has never been a 20-year period that ended lower than it started. Never. This means that the investment decisions of a 25-year-old and a 60-year-old looking at the exact same fund in the exact same market conditions should be completely different. For the 25-year-old, a 30% market drop is an opportunity, a chance to buy more of the same great companies at a discount with 40 years for those purchases to compound. For the 60-year-old nearing retirement, the same drop has a very different meaning and requires a very different response. Timeline is not just one factor in investing, it is the factor that determines what every other factor means. I wish I had internalized this earlier, because understanding it changes how you feel about market drops. When you genuinely know that your timeline is 30 years, a temporary crash stops being terrifying and starts being irrelevant to your actual outcome. The emotional weight of short-term volatility disappears almost entirely when you stop measuring your investment against what it was worth last Tuesday and start measuring it against where you need it to be in 2050.
Lesson 3. Complexity is usually the enemy.
When I first started learning about investing, I was drawn to complex strategies. I read about options, about sector rotation, about dividend growth investing, about technical analysis, about covered calls and puts and spreads. It all felt sophisticated and exciting, like I was learning a secret language that would give me an edge. What I understand now, years later, is that in investing, complexity is almost never an advantage. It is almost always a liability. Every additional layer of complexity you add to your investment approach introduces more ways for things to go wrong, more decisions that need to be made correctly, more fees that need to be paid, and more emotional traps to fall into. The investors who consistently build the most wealth over long periods of time are rarely doing something complicated. They are doing something simple, consistently, for a very long time. They own broad market index funds. They contribute automatically every month. They do not panic when the market drops. They do not get overexcited when it rises. They rebalance occasionally and then leave everything alone. That's it. The simplest possible approach, applied with extraordinary patience, beats almost every complicated strategy over a long enough time horizon. I wish I had learned earlier to be deeply suspicious of complexity in investing. If someone is pitching you a strategy that is hard to explain in 2 sentences, that is almost always a warning sign rather than a sign of sophistication. The best investment strategy is almost always the one you can describe simply, execute automatically, and stick with for decades without second-guessing yourself. Lesson 4. Comparison is the thief of good investing. One of the most destructive habits in investing, and one that social media has made dramatically worse, is comparing your portfolio performance to someone else's or to the most exciting returns in the market at any given moment. Someone in your life made 40% on one stock last year. Someone online tripled their money on a crypto trade. Your brother-in-law's real estate investment is crushing everything you own. Every one of these comparisons pulls you toward higher risk, more speculative behavior at exactly the moment you should be staying the course with your boring, reliable index funds. Here's what those comparisons always leave out. The person who made 40% on one stock last year probably lost 60% on 3 others. The crypto triple came with the risk of a 90% loss that just didn't happen that time. The real estate win required capital, time, expertise, and a favorable market that may not repeat. Cherry-picked success stories are everywhere in investing. Full risk-adjusted track records are almost never shared. Your investment portfolio is not competing with anyone else's. It's competing with one thing only: the future version of yourself who either has financial freedom or does not. Stay focused on your own plan, your own timeline, and your own goals. The moment you start chasing what someone else made last year, you've left your strategy and entered speculation. And speculation, compounded over time, almost always loses to patience. We're halfway through the lessons, and I hope at least one of these has landed in a way that feels genuinely useful. If it has, please take a moment right now to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Every week there's new content designed to help you build a stronger relationship with money and investing, and I would love to have you as part of this community long term. All right, back to the lessons. Lesson 5. Your savings rate matters more than your investment returns. This is one of the most counterintuitive lessons I have learned, and one of the most important. Most people spend enormous energy trying to optimize their investment returns, researching the best funds, debating asset allocation, looking for an extra percentage point here or there, and very little energy thinking about their savings rate, which is the percentage of their income they are actually putting to work. The math makes the case clearly. An investor with a 30% savings rate, earning 8% returns, will build dramatically more wealth than an investor with a 5% savings rate, earning 12% returns, even though the second investor has significantly better investment performance. The amount going in is a multiplier on the returns. If very little is going in, even spectacular returns cannot build serious wealth.
In the early years of investing, your savings rate is by far the dominant factor in your wealth building. You simply do not have enough invested yet for investment returns to do the heavy lifting. A 10% return on $5,000 is $500. A 10% return on $100,000 is $10,000. Building that base as quickly as possible by saving and investing aggressively in the early years is what sets the stage for compound growth to take over later. I wish I had focused much earlier on finding ways to increase my savings rate rather than searching for marginally better investment returns. Cutting expenses that did not add real value to my life, building additional income streams, and automating a higher percentage of my paycheck into investments, these moves had a far bigger impact on my financial trajectory than any optimization I ever made to my actual investment choices. Lesson 6. The news is almost never useful for long-term investors. When I started investing, I felt like staying informed was essential. I read financial news constantly. I followed market commentary. I paid attention to analyst upgrades and downgrades, central bank announcements, economic indicators, and geopolitical developments. I thought this was making me a smarter investor. It was not. Financial news is produced by an industry whose business model depends on your ongoing attention. That industry has a structural incentive to make everything feel urgent, consequential, and actionable because urgency drives clicks, engagement, and advertising revenue. The reality is that the vast majority of what is reported in financial media on any given day is noise that has no meaningful relevance to the long-term value of a diversified portfolio of great companies held for decades. The investors who consume the most financial news are consistently shown in research to trade more frequently, earn lower returns, and experience higher levels of investing anxiety than those who limit their media consumption. Every new piece of information triggers the urge to do something, to react, to adjust, to protect. And in long-term investing, doing something is usually the wrong answer. What I do now is very different from what I did at the start. I check my portfolio roughly once a quarter to confirm everything is running as intended. I read books rather than news. Books that cover timeless principles of investing rather than the drama of this week's market movements. And when something genuinely significant happens in the economy or the markets, I assume my automatic investment plan has already handled it correctly, because it has. News consumption is not a requirement for successful investing. In many cases, it is an obstacle to it.
Lesson 7. The psychological side is harder than the technical side. Of everything on this list, this is the lesson I feel most strongly about, and the one I think is least talked about in financial education. The technical side of investing, knowing what to buy, where to open an account, how to set up automatic contributions, is genuinely not complicated. You can learn the mechanics in a weekend. The hard part is everything that happens in your head over the following decades. Watching a portfolio you have built over years drop 25% in 2 months is a visceral, physical experience. It does not feel like a number on a screen. It feels like something is being taken from you. And in that moment, every rational argument for staying invested, the historical recovery data, the long-term returns, the senselessness of selling low, competes directly with a very loud emotional response that says, "Get out now," before it gets worse. The investors who succeed long-term are not the ones who never feel that fear. They're the ones who have prepared for it in advance. They have read about past market crashes and recoveries. They have made their plan during calm conditions when they could think clearly. They have automated their investing so that staying the course requires no active decision in the moment of maximum stress. And they have built the conviction through knowledge and experience that the temporary pain of a market decline is the price you pay for the long-term gain of being invested at all. Building psychological resilience around investing is not something that happens overnight. It builds through education, through experience, and through deliberately choosing to hold through your first real market downturn rather than selling. That experience, staying invested through a scary drop and watching the recovery happen, is more valuable than any book or video on the subject, including this one. But books and videos like this one help you prepare for that moment so that when it comes, you are ready for it. Lesson 8. Start before you feel ready, because you will never feel fully ready.
and waiting for that feeling is one of the most expensive decisions you can make. Feeling ready to invest is not a real state that arrives after sufficient preparation. It is a moving target that recedes as you approach it. Learn a little and you realize how much you do not know. Learn more and the complexity expands to fill your new knowledge. There is always another book to read, another concept to understand, another thing that could go wrong that you have not fully prepared for. Waiting for complete confidence before starting is simply another form of the waiting we talked about in video 2, and it carries the same compounding cost. The investors I've seen build real wealth over time are almost universally people who started imperfectly. They opened an account without fully understanding everything. They made their first purchase feeling uncertain. They set up automatic contributions before they had optimized their budget completely. And then they kept going, learning along the way, adjusting as their knowledge grew, and letting time do what time does to invested money. You do not need to know everything before you start. You need to know enough to take the first step safely. Open a free account at Fidelity or Schwab, put money into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund, and set up automatic monthly contributions. That's it. Everything else can be learned while the money is already working. The cost of starting imperfectly is tiny. The cost of waiting for perfection is enormous. Start now, learn as you go. Let time be your most powerful asset. 8 lessons I wish I had known before I started investing. The market is designed to make you feel wrong. Your timeline changes what every market movement means. Complexity is usually the enemy of good returns. Comparison to others destroys good strategy. Your savings rate matters more than your investment returns. Financial news is mostly noise. The psychological side is harder than the technical side. And the most important of all, start before you feel ready, because you never will. None of these lessons require a high income or specialized knowledge to apply. They require awareness, patience, and the willingness to think differently about money than most of the people around you. If even one of these lands and changes something about how you approach investing, this video has done its job. The books and resources in the description below cover many of these themes in much greater depth, particularly the psychological side of investing, which deserves far more attention than most beginner content gives it. Please go check those out after this. Drop a comment and tell me which lesson hit closest to home for you. I find these conversations genuinely meaningful, and I read every single response. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, please do that now. We are one video away from completing this entire 10-part series, and you do not want to miss the final one. Next video, we're breaking down how passive income is actually built, the strategies that realistically work for everyday people, what most creators leave out, and how to slowly create income streams that are no longer completely tied to your time and effort.